Alrighty, so good afternoon and thank you for attending the public webinar for the Peninsula Regional Coastal Storm Risk Management Feasibility Study. As noted in the meeting chat, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the project website for those who may not be able to attend one of our public meetings. My name is Miranda Ryan and I am the environmental lead for this study. And to kick us off, we'll have Michelle Hamer, the Norfolk District Planning Branch Chief, say a few words.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you all for joining us today. This study began in response to a request from the City of Hampton with a goal of examining coastal storm risk, formulating measures, and determining if there was federal interest in partnering in alternatives to reduce risk. The draft report, published on July 22nd, examines coastal storm risk in Hampton and Poquoson. As you might imagine, the risk in both cities is extensive and in fact, it's some of the highest risk in the Commonwealth. The tentatively selected plan, or TSP, in the draft report reflects only a portion of that need. The challenge we face is that it can be difficult to fund large projects at the local and federal level, since they both compete with necessary and important projects. Implementation of large-scale projects can also be extremely lengthy before tangible benefits can be realized. To reduce some of that friction between now and the final report, the project delivery team, in close coordination with Hampton and Poquoson, will continue to refine the scale of the TSP to ensure the recommendation of an early actionable plan that reflects an interim solution that can be reasonably implemented in a timely manner to reduce risk in the study area. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to the discussion. And now I'll turn it back to Miranda.
Thanks, Michelle. We also have Olivia Askew, a resilience officer for the City of Hampton, on the call today. Olivia, do you have any opening remarks that you'd like to share?
Yes, thank you, Miranda. The City of Hampton appreciates the opportunity to partner with the Norfolk District to collaboratively plan for short-term non-structural strategies for critical infrastructure in the city's neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to coastal storms, where structural measures are not feasible. While the City of Hampton does support the early actionable, tentatively selected plan presented in this draft report, the city continues to express concerns about the feasibility of successfully implementing a project at the current scale. The city is committed to continued collaboration with the Norfolk District and the City of Poquoson to refine and optimize the early actionable plan into a project that tangibly reduces short-term coastal storm risk and meets the city's long-term resilience goals. In addition, the city looks forward to future partnerships with the Norfolk District to pursue nature-based and structural measure analyses, as these measures are urgently needed to reduce citywide risk. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Olivia. And again, thank you all for your participation today. In the interest of time, we'll hold all questions till the end of the presentation. However, if you do have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat and we will answer it in our Q&A session at the end. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started on the content of our presentation. So here's our agenda for today. We jumped straight into the welcome and introductions. Next, we'll review the study background, talk about the feasibility study process and schedule. We'll briefly discuss what non-structural measures are and define the existing and future coastal storm risks in the study area. We'll also talk about the comprehensive non-structural plan and early actionable plan and share more detailed information on home elevations and dry flood proofing. And then lastly, we'll discuss the public review period and have a Q&A session. So to give some context to the importance of coastal storm resilience efforts, both Hampton and Poquoson are low-lying communities located in an area where multiple rivers converge with the Chesapeake Bay. This, paired with changing environmental conditions, contributes to both cities being vulnerable to widespread and complex flooding challenges, resulting from a combination of effects from coastal storm surge, tidal action, stormwater, and groundwater. This study focuses specifically on the flood risks from coastal storms. And additionally, in 2017, the City of Hampton adopted the Living with Water Adaptation Framework, which is a long-term citywide resilience framework that integrates flood risk, community values, and adaptation planning in a way that allows water to be an integral part of the community. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, this project focuses specifically on flood risk from coastal storms. This is because the authority for the project is Public Law 84-71, which authorizes the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or USACE, to study coastal areas at risk from coastal storm impacts. One thing to note is that this study serves as an interim response to address coastal storm risks in the most vulnerable areas of Hampton and Poquoson. Even with implementation of non-structural measures, which we will discuss shortly, there will still be flood risk in the study area. The City of Hampton is the non-federal sponsor for the study, and the City of Poquoson is a study partner. This study is 100% federally funded, and the funding comes from the Disaster Relief Act of 2019, or DRA 19, which allocated $3 million for the study. And as a part of the study, we have developed an integrated feasibility report and environmental assessment. And this slide shows the USACE civil works process and feasibility study process. Civil works projects are those that USACE develops for the public benefit. This includes things like adding sand to beaches, building flood walls and levees, or elevating homes in flood-prone areas. We are currently in the feasibility phase of the civil works process. This phase consists of developing and evaluating potential solutions and ultimately leads to a recommended plan. If the recommended plan is approved, Congress would need to authorize and appropriate funding before future phases of the project could begin. The feasibility process consists of 4 general phases: scoping, alternative evaluation and analysis, feasibility analysis of a selected plan, and Washington level review. The study team has just completed the alternative evaluation and analysis phase, which ended with the development of a draft report and includes a discussion of and comparison of alternatives and the selection of a comprehensive non-structural plan and a smaller scale early actionable plan. The draft report was released to the public on July 22nd and will be available for review and comment through September 5th. We're looking to members of the community for feedback on the comprehensive non-structural plan and early actionable plan, both of which we will go over in today's presentation. So the scope of the study is limited to non-structural coastal storm risk management measures for residential, non-residential, and critical infrastructure in the cities of Hampton and Poquoson. Unlike structural measures, which includes things like levees and seawalls, which are designed to reduce the probability of flooding, non-structural measures focus entirely on reducing the consequences of flooding by modifying buildings or behavior in flood-prone areas. This feasibility study focuses primarily on the elevation of residential structures and dry floodproofing of non-residential structures and critical infrastructure. Elevation typically involves raising the lowest first floor of a residential building to a design flood elevation that's determined during a feasibility study. With the consideration of sea level change, this often aligns with or exceeds the FEMA 1% annual exceedance probability flood elevation plus local freeboard requirements. And in this slide, the photos on the left-hand side are an example of what a home elevation might look like. And then dry flood proofing involves making a structure watertight up to 3 feet and is done using waterproof coatings, impermeable membranes, sealants, and shields or gates applied to doors and windows. And that is an example of that is displayed on the right-hand side of the slide. And to visualize regional inundation from coastal storm surge, our engineering team developed a 2-dimensional model. The model incorporates the projected USACE high sea level change curve based on data from the nearby Sewell's Point tide gauge. And the image on the right represents that projection of maximum depths for the 2% annual exceedance probability flood or 50-year storm event with sea level change incorporated for the year 2090. And here I will pass it off to Andrew Lobo, the study's economist, to talk about economic modeling and future without project conditions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Lobo, and I am the lead economist on this study. As you just heard, this is a non-structural study, so maybe wondering how it is that we determine which structures are the ones that are included in our plan. I want to talk a little bit about how we get to how we make those decisions. So the previous slide showed an example of the kinds of storms that can occur in Hampton-Coast. And these are the kinds of engineering inputs that go into the models that the economists use to determine risk in the study area. The economists also develop information about the consequences of what happens when there's a storm. What gets damaged? How much damage is there? Is there a risk to life safety? Are there transportation impacts? Are there business impacts? So the economic modeling is interfacing the engineering information, the information about the storms, with the consequences information in order to develop dollar-denominated outputs. And essentially, these outputs show how much damage there is on average within the study area. And this understands that many years there will be little or no damage, but then when you have a rare event, there may be a lot of damage. Additionally, sea level change may exacerbate storms, and this can cause more damage in even frequent events. So let's talk a little bit more about how we characterize risk in a storm. And go to the next slide, please. So the simplified way that the models work is by relating the depth flooding at a structure to a percentage of structure value loss. So this means that our team had to develop detailed information about the over 50,000 structures across the cities of Hampton and Poquoson. The kinds of information that we were putting together included things like the first floor elevation of the structure, things like the type of structure, if it's a residential or commercial structure, how many floors it's had, et cetera, and the structure's value. And this essentially allowed us to determine dollar-denominated coastal storm damage risk on a structure-by-structure basis. We also identified 33 key critical infrastructure facilities that are important to emergency response, both during and after coastal storm events. And those facilities can be seen in the table on this slide. The modeling that I'm describing here helps us characterize what we call the future without project condition. And this is the expected risk to the study area if USACE were not to take action. And the future without project modeling results help us determine the areas of high risk and help us refine the focus of the study. The map on the right of this slide shows the present value damage on a structure by structure basis under the high sea level change curve over our period of analysis. And you can see the areas of high damage here are likely good places for non-structural intervention, things like home elevations and dry flood proofing that we were discussing earlier. I can go to the next slide, please. So the future without project modeling results, plus additional information from the city of Hampton, led us to screening some of the critical infrastructure facilities that we had previously identified. So facilities were removed from the analysis for a variety of reasons. If they were located on very high ground or had a high first floor elevation, if they were located outside of the 1,000-year floodplain, or if they were already scheduled for near-term replacement. So all of these criteria would suggest that the risk for those particular structures is low. And this actually led us to removing 12 of the critical infrastructure facilities from our plan, resulting in a total of 21 for consideration. And if you compare the two maps that are shown here, you can see that the facilities that were removed are primarily in the northwest of Hampton, where the flood risk is lower, the coastal storm flood risk is lower, while the facilities that remain are in much more frequent floodplains. And I will turn it over to Nicole to discuss the development of the focus areas.
Thank you, Andrew. So my name is Nicole Miller. I serve as the planning lead on this study, and I'm going to walk you through how the plan formulation has progressed, kind of building off the future without project modeling results we just discussed. So due to the size of the study area, which includes over 50,000 structures, as Andrew mentioned previously, the team developed non-structural focus areas to concentrate the future with project analyses on communities that are most at risk to coastal storm flooding. So future with project scenarios represent the different action alternatives that are developed for comparison, which we'll discuss in greater detail shortly. But to develop these alternative plans, the focus areas were established based on several factors, including community cohesion. We wanted to avoid dividing established neighborhoods and communities when drawing the boundaries. Hydrology, the boundaries generally follow the watersheds, where hydrologic, can't say that word today, hydrologic conditions, there we go, and coastal hazards are similar. And then finally, highest risks. So they were concentrated around those areas that indicated high repetitive damages related to coastal storms. So by establishing these focus areas, that structure inventory was reduced to just under 27,000 structures. So this allowed the team to develop a better representation of the structures likely to be included in the alternative plans, which we will discuss on the next slide. So using those non-structural focus areas and the most at-risk critical infrastructure facilities, the team developed alternative plans to be included in the future with project modeling. So these modeling results demonstrated that economic benefits for residential and non-residential structures are optimized in the 2040 5% annual exceedance probability floodplain, which includes about 6,823 structures. So along with the remaining 21 critical infrastructure, which was not aggregated by floodplain, this refined the maximum number of structures considered in the alternative plans to 6,844. So I'll explain that a little bit further by going through the table on this slide. So first we have the no action alternative, which is always included, and that represents the future without project condition. Then we have 3 with project or action alternatives. So alternative 2 includes only the 21 critical infrastructure facilities that were described. Alternative 3 encompasses non-structural measures for the 6,823 residential and non-residential structures and does not include any of the identified critical infrastructure. And then finally, we have alternative 4, which is a combination alternative that includes all 6,844 structures. That's residential, non-residential, and those identified critical infrastructure. So those are kind of our 4 alternatives. The remaining columns in this table highlight some of the key results and metrics used to compare these alternative plans, but we're only highlighting a few metrics on this slide. There's definitely additional discussion of the plan evaluation and comparison in the draft report. But what we've shown here in the 3rd column, you can see the expected damages prevented. So you can see a substantial increase in the expected present value damages prevented in the plans that include the elevation of residential structures and floodproofing of non-residential structures, over $7 billion in expected damages prevented. You can also see that the combination plan, alternative 4, has the highest expected damages prevented, which is logical as it's additive of the other 2 alternatives. The 4th column in the table identifies the BCR, or the benefit to cost ratio. BCR greater than 1 indicates that the benefits outweigh the cost. However, BCR only accounts for the monetized benefits that can be captured in the economic model and is just one part of the broader picture. So we've also got a couple other metrics here. We included an overview of how each plan performs in terms of meeting the study objectives and federal administration priorities. And while each alternative hits a few of these, that combination alternative 4 kind of incorporates the best of both worlds and is considered the alternative plan that maximizes total net public benefits across economic, social, and environmental factors. So based on the current level of analysis, alternative 4 has been identified as what we're calling the comprehensive non-structural plan. And I'm going to kind of talk through that a little bit further. If you can go to the next slide, Miranda. All right, so this brings us to our next topic, which includes taking that extremely large comprehensive non-structural plan, which includes up to 6,844 structures, and recommending a smaller subset of that plan for authorization in this current study effort. So I'll expand on on what I mean by this in a moment, but I just wanted to first emphasize that evaluating the risk across such a large study area and identifying this large scale comprehensive non-structural plan really highlights the vulnerability of both Hampton and Poquoson and demonstrates that you can economically justify non-structural measures for thousands of structures. With that said, the Corps of Engineers has recently been directed by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works to focus on solutions that can be reasonably implemented in a timely manner to deliver tangible benefits to the public. Not only is time a consideration in recommending a plan that can be reasonably implemented, but we also have to consider the cost of the recommendation. So these are words you're going to hear repeatedly. So what this means is even though we have a comprehensive non-structural plan that is expected to be economically justified and have full environmental compliance by the end of the study, the scale of that plan is far too large to be reasonably implemented in a timely manner. So the team began to split that plan up into kind of two general buckets, the early actionable and future action. So the intent here is, again, to identify a subset of that comprehensive non-structural plan that we just discussed to continue advancing as early actionable. So what this means is these elements would ultimately be included as an actionable recommendation in the chief's report, which would then go to Congress for authorization. So the remaining elements would be considered future action plans. And essentially, this means that while the full non-structural plan will be described in the final report, additional studies would be required to advance the pieces that fall into that future action plan bucket before they could be recommended for authorization. This would involve advancing the analysis beyond the current level that will be included in this feasibility report, particularly advancing the design maturity and the cost estimate. And Miranda, if you don't mind, the next slide. All right, so I know going kind of quickly for the sake of time, but just once again, before we dive into the early actionable plan, I just want to emphasize that this is an iterative process across a very large area with extensive risk. So there is going to be further refinement of the scope and scale of the early actionable plan between the draft and the final report to ensure that that final recommendation is something that can be reasonably implemented. So this is intended to be an early actionable increment that can deliver those tangible benefits to the highest risk structures and is just one piece of the puzzle to address the coastal storm risk across the study area. Additionally, this is kind of like the first iteration of the early actionable plan, and we just want to acknowledge that what is presented here is still far too large to achieve this, so we will be scaling it down further. But I just want to kind of go ahead and dive into how we got to the early actionable plan at this point in the study. And to do that, we started with those focus areas that were previously established and began dividing them into tiers based on several criteria. That included physical coastal storm risk, areas with low disaster preparedness and recovery capacity, low-lying topography that is less suited for structural measures, and priorities from both cities for early action. So based on those criteria, we identified Tier 1 focus areas, and these were considered the highest priority for intervention and included in the early actionable plan. The remaining focus areas and any elements not included in the early actionable plan are recommended to be included in those future study efforts. So based on the criteria I just mentioned, the early actionable plan currently consists of non-structural measures for up to 3,977 residential and non-residential buildings across 11 of the focus areas and up to 21 of those critical infrastructure facilities across Hampton and Poquoson. And you can see those on the map to the right. We've got the critical infrastructure as well as the identified Tier 1 focus areas. The ones that are in the gray cross-hatching would be considered part of future action plans. And again, before I move on, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I just want to reiterate that we acknowledge the scale of the plan. The early actionable plan must continue to be reduced. So these numbers are going to continue to change as the study progresses. Additionally, I just wanted to note that I think this iteration is really important to emphasize once again the high coastal storm risk in the area. Even with all those criteria applied in this our tiered approach, there are still nearly 4,000 structures identified for inclusion in the early actionable plan at this point. So just going to go ahead and wrap up the overview of the general plan formulation here. I'll turn it back over to Miranda, who is going to provide some information on the specific non-structural measures proposed in the early actionable plan. That's going to be specifically home elevations and flood proofing of non-residential structures and critical infrastructure. So over to you, Miranda.
Thanks, Nicole. I will begin with home elevations. So the first thing I'd like to mention is that if a home is recommended for elevation, participation is completely voluntary. For homeowners who choose to participate, several steps are required before a home can be elevated. Homeowners must sign a participation agreement, provide proof of ownership, tax liability documentation, and any mortgage or lien information. Homeowners must also allow the home to be inspected for structural conditions and hazardous, toxic, and radioactive waste, or HTRW. And they must grant a perpetual restrictive easement or deed covenant that allows construction access and documents restrictions related to construction and occupancy below the first floor elevation. And so after these steps are completed, the Corps of Engineers will make a final eligibility determination. And if approved, the entire structure, including utilities and mechanical equipment, will be elevated. Construction related to each home elevation is estimated to take between 3 and 6 months. And during construction, property owners are responsible for arranging their own temporary housing, but tenants or renters may be eligible for relocation assistance. Homeowners may also choose to elevate higher than the federally cost-shared height at their own expense, but home additions cannot be constructed as part of the elevation project. And again, I'm echoing Nicole here. We'd like to emphasize that participation in home elevation is entirely voluntary, and the number of homes identified in the draft report represents an initial planning level estimate. Before the final report is complete, the recommended number of homes will be refined to support an early actionable plan that can be reasonably implemented in a timely manner. And so, like residential home elevations, participation in dry floodproofing is entirely voluntary. Dry floodproofing helps reduce flood damage by sealing buildings to floodwaters and strengthening them to better withstand flooding, up to 3 feet. Depending on the building, this may include the installation of watertight doors, shields, or barriers for opening. Dry floodproofing is most effective when there is enough advance warning before a storm. Most systems require trained personnel to install temporary barriers or closures before flooding begins, and property owners are responsible for testing, storing, and maintenance of equipment, and must also ensure that it can be deployed when needed. It's also important to note that the Corps of Engineers does not recommend dry floodproofing in areas where storm waves are expected to reach 3 feet or greater. In those areas, the force of waves can exceed what floodproof buildings are designed to withstand. So this slide shows the remaining major milestones for the feasibility study. The next steps include completing the public comment period for the draft report, preparing the final report, and ultimately submitting a chief's report to Congress. The draft report explains how the study team developed and evaluated different alternatives before identifying the comprehensive non-structural plan and the first iteration of the early actionable plan. It also documents the expected costs, environmental effects, and uncertainties that were considered in developing these recommendations. One final point. Again, the early actionable plan is being refined, and as we move from draft report to the final report, that plan will be updated to reflect public input, additional technical analyses, and funding considerations. And so today we're asking for your feedback. we want to hear your thoughts on the proposed comprehensive and early actionable plans discussed during this presentation and described in the draft report. Every comment we receive during the public review period will be considered and formally addressed as we prepare the final report, which is expected in March of 2027. Again, we will be accepting public comments through September 5th, and comments can be submitted via email at peninsulacsrm@usace.army.mil, standard mail, or at in-person public meetings via comment cards. The in-person public meetings to be held in Poquoson and Hampton will be on August 11th and 13th, and additional information on the locations and times of those meetings is available on our study website, which is displayed at the bottom of this slide. And with that, I'd like to open the floor for any questions or comments regarding what was presented today.
We have one from the chat. It's have you been given any indication from leadership if the scaling down of the early actionable plan will allow you to move forward regardless of the non-structural pause?
So I will start that one. Thank you, Rachel, for your question. Certainly, one of the main focuses for the chief's report is reaching that 35%. So what we include in our final recommendation should have some confidence that it can achieve 35% design. We don't have clarity as to what will move forward. Our direction is to keep moving forward until we are given us a different direction. But we recognize that's certainly up to our leadership purview regarding whether we will successfully complete a chief's report. But all direction that we have right now is to keep leaning forward. It's an understanding that in areas such as this, that there are areas in Hampton and Poquoson and other areas in the coastal community that non-structural measures are viable measures to reduce coastal storm risk.
Okay, we have one in the chat from Coulter. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, with WTKR in Norfolk. A lot of this information I think is going to go way over many of our viewers' heads. What is the elevator pitch version of the study update? Additionally, what do you want people to take away from this study?
Well, Coulter, thank you so much for that question. I'm going to start, but then certainly Miranda or Nicole, if you want to jump in and add anything. I guess the takeaway is we have a draft report that has been published and available on our website. We would love for the public to take a look and provide comments, which we will then need to include in our final report. So please, if there's interest, please take a look at our draft report and please feel free to submit those comments. We really appreciate that. It helps us understand, certainly from the ground level, the public's view of our plan forward.
Okay, we have a comment from Rachel Road. I'll include it in our written comments as well, but wanted to flag EDF presented to USACE last year on lessons learned from Southwest Coastal LA. NOLA District has told us our research should be available on the SharePoint within USACE. Please take a look at that and get the ideas on community perspectives of home elevations.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. We definitely will take a look at that. Coulter, I was thinking of one last thought for takeaway is that definitely the risk that is out there within coastal Virginia, specifically within the cities of Hampton and Poquoson, really does need a combined approach. Really, the risk is larger than one community can handle themselves, and just that opportunity for the partnership to evaluate that risk and through available resources be able to start to tangibly reduce that risk. So we appreciate the partnership with the cities of Hampton and Poquoson.
If anybody else has any questions, you can go ahead, and I think I gave the ability to unmute yourselves. You can go ahead and unmute yourselves and talk or leave a question or comment in the chat.
Hey, this is Coulter with WTKR. I just have one quick follow-up question. Obviously, you guys are looking for feedback. Have you gotten any feedback from residents or business owners or anyone in the city of Hampton or Poquoson? And if so, what has that feedback been?
I can go ahead and get started on this comment. So the draft report was released on the 22nd of July, and thus far we haven't received any comments in our project inbox. So we are waiting to get comments from the public, but we are also having some in-person public meetings in the evenings next week where we're anticipating getting a lot more face-to-face engagement and feedback from the communities where this project would occur.
Okay, and a question from Jamie Chapman is, are there provisions to canvas homes in the targeted areas to explain the elevation process?
So I will take this one. I believe that will be part of certainly of our next phase, which would be pre-construction engineering and design. And then certainly as it leads into construction, there'll be an opportunity to provide information out to the community, along with that ability for the community to, as they're determined to be eligible to participate, there would be more information and they'd be available to sign up again to participate in that. So I believe that will be in the next phase. Certainly right now we're looking at identifying what that final early actionable plan would be and then working through the process to get that project authorized by Congress.
Thanks, Michelle. I was just going to add that in addition to the recording being posted online, we'll definitely include these slides as well. We had some kind of general overview of the process. There also is a non-structural implementation plan that is associated with the draft report. It's an appendix. It's implementation is a big topic and something we're going to be focusing on and refining further. So that'll evolve as we move towards the final report, but that's available online as well. Just wanted to add that.
Another question from the chat is from Randy Todd. To what extent does this strategy align with other flooding initiatives? Is there a coordinated effort of which this study and strategy is a part, i.e. coastal remediation through planting, incorporating natural or man-made reefs, breakwaters, and other approaches that could enhance the effectiveness of this approach? Or is the study solely and exclusively focused on residential elevation and non-residential dry flood proofing?
Yeah, I can start. Thank you for the question, Randy. So this current study was scoped to analyze non-structural measures only to fit within our what we call 3x3 constraints, which is 3 years and $3 million. So it was limited to non-structural solutions only. But I definitely think the intent here is to really demonstrate the risk across the study area and kind of show that need for additional initiatives. And I know the city of Hampton and Poquoson, they both have complementary initiatives as well. But the intent is that, like I said earlier, this is just one piece of the puzzle. So the hope is to have studies in the future that would consider both structural and nature-based solution in addition to non-structural measures, such as what's proposed in this early actionable plan. So, I don't know if anyone else has something to add, but.
Are there any other questions or comments out there? Is there a slide that shows an email that people can send their comments or questions to? They have it? There we go.
Yep, and this information is all on our website as well. So if you search for Peninsula Regional CSRM project and Norfolk District, it should be one of the first Google searches that comes up, because it might be easier to search it on Google than remember the project website.
Yeah, I did post the link in the chat as well, where it's easier to grab for people.
And Miranda, for everyone's information, there are 2 other opportunities besides the email address to submit their comments and to chat with us. And that is next week. And those dates and locations are...
Sorry, they are in Poquoson and Hampton. I'd have to look up the website real quick to get the exact locations, but the meeting on the 11th is in the city of Poquoson. And Randy Todd, you're awesome. You just put everything into the chat. There we go. Thank you guys. So August 11th from 5 to 7 at the City Council chambers in Poquoson. Then on the 13th from 6 to 7:30 in the Fox Hill Neighborhood Center in Hampton.
I'd also like to add that the City of Hampton staff are doing a work session briefing to City Council on the 12th. That work session is held in Hampton City Council chambers from 1 to 4 p.m. It's also live streamed on our website and on the public network TV channels as well.
If there are no any other questions or comments, then I think we could go ahead and conclude the meeting. Does anybody from the team have anything else they'd like to say?
I don't have anything else to say, but I might just hang on the line in case somebody decides to call in later, just so I can be available for questions.
Sounds good. It'll be up until what time?
3:30.
Okay. Thank you so much for attending today.
Thank you all so much.
I'm going to turn off my camera now, though.